Good morning, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this program. I'm Steve Hochberg, the CEO of Caliber Associates, and I'm looking forward to a lively discussion this morning regarding governance and board construct and composition. First, I'd like to thank our co-sponsor, Hunt Scale Media, for their effort in organizing today's session. And this morning, I'm joined today by an outstanding panel of leaders from the biopharmaceutical industry who have built, led, worked with, and served on private, public, and not-for-profit boards within the life science sector and in their communities. I know they will bring incredible insights to our discussion, and I'd like to introduce them now. Bill Newell is currently the Chief Executive Officer and a member of the Board of Directors of Sutro Biopharma. Sutro Biopharma is a publicly traded clinical stage development, discovery, and manufacturing company focused on advancing next generation oncology therapeutics. Bill's held this position since 2009 and previously served as the president of Aerovance. Additionally, Bill has been an active leader and contributor to the life science community, currently serving as the chair of the California Life Science Association. Bill also currently serves on the board of directors of a private biotech company and the Biotechnology Innovation Organization's Health Section and Emerging Company Section. Bill received his bachelor's degree from Dartmouth and his JD from University of Michigan Law School. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Steve.
David Kabakoff is currently executive partner at Sofinnova Investments and a partner at Health Quest Capital. While a chemist by trade, David has become a leading entrepreneur and creator of numerous companies in the biopharmaceutical sector. He has founded and served as CEO of several companies, including Coherus, Spiros Development Corporation, and Salmedics. And during his tenure, David's companies have contributed great value to numerous stakeholders, shareholders, and most importantly, patients. Currently, David serves as chairman of the board of NextCure and a director of Antiva, Rainier, Narana, and Castle Biosciences. Previously, David has served on a number of private, public, and not-for-profit boards. David received his Ph.D. from Yale University and a bachelor's degree from Case Western Reserve University. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
And Rebecca Sunshine. Rebecca brings over 30 years of experience in the field of human resources within the biopharmaceutical community. She currently serves as the Executive Vice President of Human Resources for Coherus Biosciences. Coherus Biosciences is a company focused in the development of immuno-oncology products and biosimilars. Rebecca joined Coherus in 2014 and has been instrumental in shaping the company's culture, building the leadership team, and working with the board of directors to transform the company from development stage to full-scale commercialization. Previously, Rebecca served as a senior vice president of human resources and organizational dynamics at Kinetics and has spent many years working and consulting with a number of startups, private and public biopharmaceutical companies. And earlier, Rebecca had held positions in HR at Core Therapeutics, Gene Labs, and Genentech. Rebecca received her Bachelor of Arts from UC Santa Barbara and her Master in Public Administration in Health Services from University of San Francisco. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks, Steve.
And thanks so much to the three of you for participating this morning. To set the stage, I will raise some questions regarding our topic of reimagining board construct in life science companies. And following our discussion, there will be ample opportunity for Q&A session. So I'll encourage everybody to hold their questions until that time. To be sure, the spotlight has been shining brightly on the composition of boards in the past several years. And of course, it has intensified during the past year with the tremendous focus on diversity, inclusion, and equality regarding representation in key leadership roles and on company boards. It is clear that a broader perspective at these levels is good for our businesses and, of course, our society. And most companies in our sector have been hard at work to broaden their representation of diverse groups within their organizations. And of course, there's been many sessions, articles, and commentaries on this topic in the past year. So this morning, we will focus on the topic of diversity from quite a different perspective. I want to discuss expanding the diversity of functional expertise represented on the boards of biopharmaceutical companies. The challenges facing many companies are complex and changing at warp speed, and having the right mix of expertise represented in helping boards navigate key issues and business decisions is essential. So let's get started. Bill, could you briefly describe some of the key areas of functional expertise represented currently on your board? And if you were to consider adding a new board member, what additional areas of expertise might you target?
See, that's an excellent question, because we do think about how the board interacts with management and what expertise is appropriate to really dovetail and support management in our mission to bring new cancer therapeutics to patients. So we have, as every public company does, a financial expert. She was a former CFO at a significant biotech, publicly traded as well. So she brings that financial oversight and expertise to our board. We have a technical operations expert on our board as well, somebody who knows a lot about both process development and manufacturing. And as a company that is in the clinic with 4 products and has our own GMP manufacturing facility, it was quite important for us to have that capability represented on the board as well, to provide comfort and oversight from that expertise and that perspective. We have a physician on our board as well, someone who has been involved in the development of cancer therapeutics, since that's what our primary business is these days. It's important to have that expertise represented on our board. We've done a number of transactions. We have partnerships with Merck, with Bristol Myers Squibb, and with EMD Serono. And given the development of our company, business development has obviously been an important component of our success. And so having an individual who you know on our board who has a deep experience in business development also is quite beneficial to our board of directors. Our chair is a really unique woman. She served at a major San Diego biotechnology organization in a senior management position for many, many years. And so she brings a deep perspective on what it's like to run a big public company and how the lessons that she learned in her business career can be applied throughout the rest of our company. So those are some of the major expertise that we've gathered on our board at this point in time. Oh, sorry, I forgot one more. We have an individual who is a chief commercial officer at a major organization, biotech organization, multi-billion-dollar product revenue company. And as we look to develop our own pipeline of products and perhaps market them at some point in time, having that functional expertise is important. So we've been consciously assembling different skill sets through the years.
Fantastic. And if you were to telegraph perhaps another skill set that if you were expanding your board or replacing a board member that you might think about targeting, anything come to mind?
Well, the thing that we've been thinking about is how we go from a clinical stage company of about 200 employees into an organization that also has a commercial functionality associated with it. Now, that's not right in the wheelhouse in the next year or two, but it is something that we can foresee over the next 3 to 5 years. And if that comes to pass, having an individual who has helped establish a commercial function or led major commercial operations would be very helpful, because we're building it for the first time. And so having a partner on the board who can guide us is really something that we think would be quite impactful for our company. And so we'll be looking over time to add somebody with that level of expertise as well. And I think it provides the board with some comfort that even though we will have a management member at the C level who will be tasked with that and reporting to me, that, you know, not everybody knows everything, and it's oftentimes beneficial to have someone on the board who's also a domain expert to really support and then guide the company as it evolves from one stage to another. So that'll be the next area that we would be thinking about in due course.
Great. Thank you. David, you serve on a number of boards, both private and public boards. And you've probably seen a great diversity of expertise represented on a number of those boards. But as you think holistically about it, what areas of functional expertise do you see as being important for maybe one or two of your portfolio companies to consider adding?
So, you know, there's always a balance that you have to strike, I would say, between functional expertise and breadth, because boards are charged with overseeing, you know, broad issues that affect the enterprise. So it sounds like Bill and Sutro have done a terrific job of, you know, filling quite a range of positions with people of different functional expertise. I have to say, in most of the boards that I'm involved in, we have tended to look more often for breadth, sitting CEOs of public or private companies, or I'll talk about chief commercial officer role, where while you could look at that as a functional expertise, in some cases those folks have operating responsibilities for, say, a business unit, so that, you know, they bring quite a bit of breadth. And, you know, part of this depends on the stage of the company. And in many of our companies, the biggest challenge is figuring out how to rotate investor representatives off, including myself, in some cases where, you know, I've served on board for multiple years, the company's gone public, and, you know, then it's time to move on and you know, make room for some additional skills. In terms of some of the expertise, reimbursement expertise or familiarity with the payer environment is certainly something that we have sought a number of our boards. Sometimes you can think about that as you know, as a narrow function. But one of the most effective board members I worked with many years ago at Intermune was the CEO of a number of blues plans, and, you know, wasn't in the weeds of product reimbursement, but really understood the environment, and also brought senior executive perspective to the board. So I guess maybe I'll just stop with those comments for now.
Thanks. I think that that last example you provided is really important, particularly today, as we're looking at you know, companies with novel therapies and rare diseases or immuno-oncology, where clearly the whole pricing issue, both from a cost standpoint, but also a public relations standpoint, is going to be something that boards are going to really need to navigate. Rebecca, you know, as I've been working with companies and helping expand their boards, one of the focus areas that CEOs have identified has been to look at the chief human resource officer as a potential new expertise to bring to their board. And as a leader of the HR function, what value add do you believe from a governance process HR execs can contribute at the board level?
So that it's a very interesting question, because it's evolving right now. I did a little bit of research and I found a KPMG article from 2019 that said out of 10,000 board members, there's only 3% that are chief human resources officers. So, 10, 20 years ago, HR executives were always asking, how do you get to the table? How do you get invited to the table? Well, we've all learned this by being value add, being strategic, being a partner. We're not transactional anymore. We're evolving the culture of the company. Nothing's more strategic than aligning your leadership team and your board composition with your 5-year strategic plan. You can't get to where you need to go without the right people. And when we're always looking for who we're bringing in as a leader on our executive team and our board, not what you need now, it's what you need over the next 5 years. So you always have to be strategic, and it is a very incredibly thoughtful process. So I do think there is an opportunity for chief human resources officers to become board members. I think we'll see more of it. I do think it depends on the stage of the company and who you have as a executive in human resources. I would say if you're most senior HR person in a company, say it's a small evolving company, is a director level, as not a VP, but a director level, then obviously a chief human resources executive, somebody like that Bill works with, Linda Fitzpatrick, would be ideal for a board member to, map out how do you build culture. The culture is how you deliver the business. You're branding your company as you're hiring and as you're delivering your whatever it is your business is. Ours is moving into immuno-oncology, which is highly competitive. So you always have to be ahead of your competition. So there's so many aspects of executive comp and succession planning and all of those components that are part of compensation committee that HR executives like myself get involved with and help to model and make sure that we are using a third-party compensation consultant to make sure that we're adhering to all of our governance. But it is a very strategic process, and not only how you construct your leadership team, but how the board and the leadership team work together. It's a really, it's an evolving process. And we at Coherus are just evolving from being a biosimilars company with our 3rd year of revenue with about 300 employees, which is pretty amazing, into immuno-oncology. And we've just added 3 new board members. So, nothing's static in our business. Biotech is constantly evolving. You're going to see that with your leadership team. At some point, it's time to hand the baton to the next leader to take it to the next level where it is that you want to go. You've got to be strategic about it. And it's the same with the board. But I can definitely see a role for chief human resources officers, again, depending on the mix of your leadership team. You don't want redundant skills. You don't want, you don't want the same CFO that matches your CFO. You want somebody that's been, moved into a CEO role or done something different. So it's really got to be compatible and dynamic.
Hey,
Great.
Steve, if I could, Steve, go ahead, David.
Just to jump in and say that over the last sort of 24 months, pretty much all the boards that I've been involved in are putting more emphasis on organizational development and succession planning. And it not just succession for the CEO, but succession for other senior leaders, and looking for ways to get visibility of other leaders in the organizations. It's a much more active topic than it was, say, 5 years ago on boards.
I wanted to just add, from a public perspective, investors care much more today about ESG matters than they did before, and a core consideration in that is employee development. And so, we used to talk a little bit about employee development, but now investors really want you to go long in terms of your discussion of what you're doing to develop your employees. Of course, we all know it's a competitive landscape. There's a lot of capital out there, and so the competition for employees is as fierce as it's ever been. And if you can have the right culture and have the right development opportunities, that'll allow your business to continue to move forward. And I think that's another area of value that a CHRO could provide in terms of oversight and support for employee development initiatives.
Absolutely.
Great. I think to build on that, some of our clients have highlighted that in the dynamic environment that we're in with respect to M&A activities and alliance management, that these two are key issues that an HR executive can contribute to with regard to integrating teams and of course, how you build successful relationships with partners. So thanks for sharing that. David, you have served on numerous public and private company boards. And one of the things you mentioned previously was the movement of investors off a board and bringing in functional expertise. Can you comment a little bit about the right, if you will, timing, not necessarily aligned with an investor stepping off to a financing event, but rather as you think about the drug development cycle, when it might be most appropriate to bring in certain areas of expertise and how you might stage that?
Well, so we certainly have had a perspective that it's important to have independent board members, even at the early stage of our private companies. And typically in a, let's focus on, you mentioned a drug development company, typically the functional expertise that you might try to add early is clinical or medical, clinical perspective, development perspective. Another early functional expertise, Bill mentioned it, business development, alliances, partnerships, sort of the lifeblood of our industry. So, people that have strategic business development expertise are often added. The best situation, and perhaps I'm biased, is that your investor representatives come with deep operating background that can bring some of that expertise. But in terms of the timing for for rotation, there's a dynamic that says you want to try to move to a substantially independent board within a few years of going public, but you also can't turn over a board completely. You can't add 5 new members. I mean, I guess Rebecca, you said you added 3. I'm curious over what time frame, but you can't totally turn over a board in the space of a few months or 6 months. You need some continuity, and those relationships, I think, are important. So every situation here is bespoke.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go out to do a board search, every profile, every candidate has a unique profile. You almost never have a situation where you have 2 identical sort of profiles that you're trying to choose between, because everybody's unique. And the opportunity is to blend the mix of skills and the mix of experiences, and hopefully to get diverse experiences from diverse business environments.
Great. So, Bill, we've functioned on, we've talked about functional expertise in the context of skill sets and experiences. And, I would suggest that the focus of our industry being, biotech, largely US based and what I'll call North American centric, and particularly in the discovery and development stages. I'm wondering if, particularly now that Zoom has proliferated, what you might feel about the value of adding a board member from either Europe or Asia Pacific, and again, with the world getting smaller and smaller, and those markets becoming opportunity, what value can could a leader from a different country and or region provide?
See, that's a really interesting question. I guess I would say that until the start of the pandemic when we were all forced to work differently, the standard routine was we had board meetings in particular fixed locations, and if people weren't local, they flew in for that. Obviously, that can be quite a burden on somebody who lives outside the United States to do 4 or more times a year. And so, the next alternative at that point in time was to dial in on a conference call. It's not really that effective. And as we've now gotten accustomed to Zoom, I think it does change the way you think about how you might integrate somebody who can't make every trip at a point in time when we're back to in-person board meetings. Today, we have one board member who for almost the past year has been living in New Zealand with her family. And as a consequence, the ability to meet with her is only present as a result of Zoom. We all make trade-offs in that reality because, frankly, her time zone difference is very different from ours. And so while we try to make it not too early in the morning for her, but we can't make it too late for everybody in the United States, there's a balance, and people just have to be flexible a bit with their timing. So I think, having learned that this is possible, thinking about someone who is based in Europe or in Asia could be a very valuable thought exercise and possibly addition to the board, because they'll bring a different perspective. They'll bring a different commercial perspective and a business environment perspective than what we have in the United States. And if you're thinking ultimately that you want to have a commercial presence in one region or the other, having somebody who has grown up and understands the nuances and the cultural differences of that and the regulatory differences can be very, very important. The other thing is they can also bring relationships that are not easily won if you're a US-centric organization. We work hard to build relationships with many companies in many parts of the world, but the fact of the matter is, if you're only in Europe once, maybe twice a year, you can only tend to develop those relationships on a very limited basis. It's much easier for us to meet people in San Diego, or to go to Boston, or to go to New York. We do that multiple times a year. I don't go to Europe multiple times a year. I don't go to Asia multiple times a year. So having a board member who is resident in one of those areas, and we're actually have talked to somebody who lives in Europe predominantly, we think that's something that provides extra insight to the board and extra connectivity for the company. So those are the things that I think about. And as I say, it's different today than I would have thought about it probably 2 years ago.
Great, thank you. Rebecca, given that today's life science boards are rather incestuous when it comes to industry focus and experience, one CEO board member or CEO executive on one board and other functional expertise, I'm wondering if you can see any value from what I'd call a learning experience by including and thinking about expertise from other industries. I know that David shared one of his earlier board members was from the payer side. Are there any other industries that you think the biopharmaceutical industry can learn from by having and benefit from by having representation on the boards?
So I think we're in the same scenario where we've added two payers. One is a provider, an MD who is head of a large health insurance company, and the other is an oncology payer. So those are our customers. So nothing's more important to have access to our patients, which is again one of our top priorities. Other than that, I have not seen at least Coherus or any other company consider high tech or other industry. I think everything really is healthcare related and patient focused and healthcare oriented from what I've seen.
Great. David, any thoughts on that? Expanding considerations external industries?
Yeah. So I can only think of a few examples where I've seen a non-healthcare executive or functional expertise on one of our boards. One situation of somebody who spent a lot of years in the tech world and then was in a healthcare IT sort of senior IT role in a large healthcare system. But when I think about it, most of the person's background was IT, a little bit of health. I think, our industry is so diverse. I mean, we recently, in one of the molecular diagnostic companies where I serve on a board, we brought a person from the life science research tools business, not really traditional diagnostics or traditional laboratory, more of a technology research tools, and somebody who really understood the process of building and leading R&D organizations. And not so much an expert in the field of that company, but we perceived a need in that company to build and expand an R&D enterprise to a greater extent than we previously had. So we looked for somebody who did that, but they didn't do it in the specific therapeutic space, or in this case, diagnostic space. They did it in a much broader context.
Bill, do you have any thoughts on this particular issue as well?
I do, Steve. One thing that I've observed over my time at Sutro is the importance of manufacturing. And so many folks in our industry don't have their own manufacturing unit. We happen to, but it's pretty rare. And so you're reliant on contract manufacturing organizations. And I've seen boards that will have somebody who is very well connected within the contract manufacturing world. And I think that's an area that is underappreciated in terms of risk. I think, with the pandemic and the rush to vaccines and new therapeutics, I think there's a heightened awareness of the criticality of manufacturing and the scalability of manufacturing and being able to do it properly. I think we see that day in and day out. And the competition for manufacturing resources has only been amplified with the pandemic pressures to get vaccines made and therapeutics made. And so having somebody on your board who has that connectivity within that world, I think can be a very strategic advantage to somebody. And I think people are becoming more aware of that. And I've certainly seen a company in my universe that had that sort of connectivity, and it allowed them to make certain that they were not a big company, but they were competing with big companies for manufacturing resources. And that type of board expertise really levels the playing field quite a bit from a company perspective. So I think technical operations, manufacturing could be a very important skill set to have on boards for the future.
Great. Rebecca, I seem to recall that on Coherus's board, that skill set and expertise is also one that was a part of your board. Any comments with regard to Bill's thoughts on that, and how that's worked out for Coherus in terms of their manufacturing operations?
Yeah, so Bill and I shared the same board member in manufacturing, who's a fantastic, absolutely fantastic person. I've known him since I worked at Genentech 35 years ago. And the insight, of sitting in the chair, in our chairs, and knowing how to, manage these huge third-party contract manufacturing organizations, and the insight and had troubleshooting and the advice and just the sage wisdom is invaluable. So there's, I completely agree with everything that Bill has said.
Great. So I'll throw this out to the group in terms of reaction. On the one hand, when we look at focus on expertise, be it functional expertise or in some cases therapeutic expertise, when you have representation of that nature on your board, and let's just take, since each of you have involvement in immuno-oncology, and there's a desire to have representation on a board level of some expertise in that area, how do you strike the balance between what can be shared from a board member's perspective versus potential conflicts of interest in other boards they may be working with or as a consultant, et cetera? How does that issue get navigated at the board level from your perspective?
So, I've seen multiple ways to deal with this, and there is a view in the world, no conflict, no interest, which I have to say, I am probably more comfortable relying on the professionalism and personal integrity of a board member to be able to be privy to confidential information from multiple sources and not cross-contaminate. And personally, I've been in the situation where I've had to manage that myself.
Mhm.
There are a lot of people who are absolutely not comfortable with that scenario and, are much more dogmatic or, stricter about avoiding even the appearance that there might be a conflict. I think it's very much, again, circumstantial and who you're talking to. I think it is possible for experts to give independent, objective feedback, to multiple parties in a constructive way. But again, I think it's dicey, and a lot of people, even on some of the same boards I've been involved in, we've been on different sides of that issue.
Right.
When you try to manage then the potential conflict of interest issue with all the other inputs of requirement for diversity, functional or otherwise, you can very easily eliminate lots and lots of candidates if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So I agree with what David said, and frankly, true conflicts are not that common. The fact that we're all pursuing immuno-oncology doesn't mean we're all doing it the same way. There are instances where there are direct competitive pressures, product A versus product B, going after the same patient segment, et cetera. That can happen. But when we go through our nominating and governance committee to put a new board member on, we try to understand the scope of what their experience is and what their current potential for conflict of interest is. And frankly, even as competitive as immuno-oncology is, the direct competition is usually not that significant. And so, if it is, I agree with David. If you've done your diligence right and you're engaging with a board member, their integrity is a core feature of what you're looking for when you bring them onto the board. And I tend to give a lot of deference to the individual's determination. We do pay attention to it, and our directors, if they perceive even the hint of a potential conflict or the appearance of a potential conflict, we have a very open and transparent discussion about it. We come to a conclusion, and then we move on. Companies change, initiatives change. Coherus has obviously changed dramatically in terms of their focus, and so what wasn't a conflict 5 years ago might be a conflict today. So I just think you need to be sensitive to it, but I wouldn't put too much burden on it because, frankly, the true direct conflicts don't arise that often.
I agree with what you're saying, Bill. I think you also mentioned the nominating and governance committee. I think that is a very active committee for managing the board. It's not just sorting through conflict, but it's managing performance, and they should be reviewing what are the contributions of each board member on an annual basis, if not more frequent. And I'm talking about more than just, comp committee updates on a quarterly basis, or audit and finance committee updates on a quarterly basis, is really either filling out a questionnaire or really asking the questions. What have you done to help drive our strategy? What have you contributed? And that the board is also our network, right? And they're helping us in building our teams. And we're going through this huge transition, and we depend on our board and, immensely for that as well. But the having a really good nominating governance committee function, I think, is really key to managing the diversity and the different functions.
Great. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up one final topic when we think about adding expertise to boards. As a very highly regulated industry, and where there has been more than the fair share of conversation regarding issues such as pricing, what are your thoughts about having representation from individuals that have served either at the federal or state level in government roles as prior as board members, and what value they could add? David, I'll start with you.
So I've not had a lot of experience with board members coming out of government, more so interacting with folks in consulting or advisory roles. I think, again, it depends very much on the individual's background. Were they, did they serve in multiple different roles within government, or did they have a relatively narrow purview? And I actually think that regardless of functional expertise or nature of industry, I always look for folks that have worked in different environments within, the whatever context they've been in, because you just want people who've had a diverse range of business and corporate organizational experiences, because it'll have presented them with different challenges.
Bill, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the definition of who our stakeholders are has evolved over the course of my professional career. I think when I first started in our industry, if you asked the CEO who the stakeholders were, they'd have said it's the investors in our company. And over the last, call it 10 years or so, the notion of that as the sole group of stakeholders in a company really has been superseded by a broader perspective, because companies do serve many different stakeholders. You have stakeholders in your community where you employ people. You have stakeholders who are your patients, the people you're intending to get your therapeutics to or your devices to. You have stakeholders in your employee base. And so I think there is a tremendous need to be hearing the voices of different stakeholders as you make certain decisions. It's not just pricing, but compassionate use requests oftentimes come in as well. And how do you think through a particular request, or a series of requests that could actually be much more challenging than an individual request, particularly in a world in which social media can get caught up in the emotions of a particular case that is presented to a company. We've seen that over the last 5 to 10 years. And so you need to be thinking about stakeholders in a more broad fashion. And so having somebody who provides you with that different perspective based on their government service, I think allows for better decision making. With all of these individuals that we've been talking about on our board, their job is really oversight and then to provide guidance and support to the management team. At the end of the day, our job is to balance all of these factors and come up with the best decisions in the long-term best interest of our company and our stakeholders. And so I think it could be valuable at a stage where you have particularly commercial products or on the cusp of commercial products to have that other voice in the room so that you have a different perspective to weigh, because some of these decisions are very important, not just to the bottom line of the company, but to access and affordability of your medicines. And so you want to take a more holistic view, I think. And I think that type of individual could provide a different perspective.
Great. Rebecca, thought?
Yeah, so we, coming from biosimilars, obviously pricing and government policy is incredibly important to us. So we built a government affairs function internally that is really key to getting us heard in Washington, D.C. We've used a consulting company that's basically a Democrat and a Republican lobbyist. We always say the one bipartisan topic is everybody wants low drug prices, right? It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. But we have always kept an eye open for a government official or health policy person for our board. I've never had one at Coherus, but I have a great story from years ago at Kinetics. We were a Genentech spin out and we had relaxin and gamma interferon. And David, we spun out Intermune in 1998 with gamma. But with relaxin, we were treating a really rare disease called scleroderma, and Leon Panetta was the chair of the Scleroderma Foundation, and he was on our board. And unfortunately, when we unblinded the phase 3 data, the data was not good and we had to cancel the program. But Leon he's such a great guy. He lives in Monterey, at the time. And he asked if he could stay on the Kinetics board, and we welcomed him. And he not only would ask questions from a non-biotech perspective, but he gave us such good advice with dealing with drug policy and gave us access to people that we would not have had access to. So it was really, he was on my comp committee, so he was just a great guy. But that's one story of a government official that ended up really adding value.
Fantastic. Well, they say time flies when you're having fun. And it's such a robust discussion that we're clicking into our Q&A session. So first, I want to thank each of you for the tremendous insight and valuable conversation to this discussion. There's already a long list of some questions from the participants, so I'm going to get right to it. The first one comes from Paul, who is on the board of Biosciences, a company focused on delivering a cure for type 1 diabetes. Paul mentioned that recently the company added a board member that represented patients who also had financial and legal experience. And his question was, what are your thoughts with actually having board representation from a patient advocacy group?
Well, I think, let me step in as the CEO of Sutro. I think the voice of patients has only increased in our industry. And I think companies now better appreciate than they ever did before the importance of interacting with patient advocacy groups early and dovetailing you're thinking about what's the best way to develop and position a novel therapeutic with the desires and wishes of the patient. And the patient advocacy groups are a nice funnel point to get good perspective on all of that. So I think having a individual who's a patient advocate on the board, again, goes back to the broad stakeholder view that I had. It just provides another perspective for you on the patient experience, which is ultimately a key component of your commercial opportunity. If you've got a great drug, but the patient experience is awful, frankly, it's not going to be as well received and as broadly utilized as it would be if you tailored it differently. And understanding how the patient perceives the value benefit is also important, I think, when we think about the pricing and reimbursement. So all of that, I think, adds to the value. I think Paul noted there were other skills as well. And so I do think it's important that individuals who have an expertise or a functional area that they bring also have a broader foundation with which to contribute to the board dialogue, because not every question that you wrestle with as a board has anything at all to do with the particular functional expertise of an individual. There are broader questions that we need to address. And so I always like to make certain that I've got a holistic view of the individual, not just what they're bringing from functional expertise, but how do they think? How do they fit with our board? How do they play in the boardroom? Can they entertain new ideas and build on them because they have a different lens that they're looking at them? So I think that's the way I think about adding new board members and open to having patient advocates. I think that could be a very good skill, functional area to add to the board.
Great. David, I'm going to let you take this next question because it's probably pretty appropriate. This question is that sometimes strategic partners ask for a seat on the board or at least an observer right. What are the panelists' thoughts, and David, your thoughts on adding a board member that might be a member of a strategic partner or an alliance partner?
So I have had the experience of board representative or observer from either corporate strategic investors, or maybe the question is directed to, a corporate collaborator, part of a strategic alliance. I think, again, it's very much dependent on how that particular corporation operates, what the sort of rules of engagement are. And I've been in situations where boards have had explicit discussions with a corporate nominee to say, hey, here's how we propose to operate. You'll be fully engaged as a board member, except under the circumstance where we may be discussing the business terms of the alliance, or you may have to recuse yourself. And again, there are different views. Some folks would say, absolutely not, you don't want them in the boardroom. But again, it depends on the individual. Do they bring a industry perspective that will be constructive and productive for the company? And I will give one situation some years ago where I was on a board with an individual Paul probably knows from Novartis Ventures. And Novartis Ventures operated pretty much as their principal objective was financial return to the corporation. There was a company sale process, and this individual was the one telling his corporate strategic business folks that their offer just wasn't enough. if they wanted to win the deal, they were going to have, and he was clearly operating on the side of our company, and so I've seen that. And I do think, again, one has to, Bill said this about patient advocacy. The question is, what else do they bring to your board other than they're a representative of the strategic partner? Do they bring years of senior management expertise, or development expertise, or financial business development savvy? Are there skills that they can bring, and are they prepared to sit with an independent hat? And some professionals, can clearly do that effectively, and maybe others are, going to be less oriented to that.
Great. Let me preface this next question as, first of all, no self-interest, and that it actually is coming from a participant who is represented in the executive search community. And the question, Rebecca, probably appropriate for you,
Okay.
would be, are there any thoughts about bringing on to your board someone from the executive search community?
So at Coherus, we had a board member since the beginning of time who had worked with my CEO at a previous company. So he knew my CEO's style really well, and he was invaluable in filling out the leadership team and the executive management team when we were private from the beginning of Coherus until we went public. He stayed on the board once we went public, but it was a challenge for me particularly because of the audit. The E&Y auditors would constantly ask about related parties. You have a board member who's doing a search, isn't that a conflict? So I had to often be strategic and make sure that I was giving, if I gave him one search, I had to give somebody else another search. If he had two searches, I had to spread them out, but I constantly was defending it. And so I do think there's a point in time when it is a great idea and very, very much value added, and especially knowing every CEO's style and the strategy of the company is so different. If they have insight into that person, then they really know other leaders that can work with that style and that culture. So that's my 2 cents.
Great.
Steve, if I could just build on that for one second, and that is, I think that's a not uncommon phenomenon that people who are in private company boards may also be consulting with the company on a particular matter. And they make a nice dual fit, if you will, at that stage. But I can echo Rebecca's comments. Once you become a public company, and unless the financial consulting relationship is de minimis, it gets to be a particularly dicey situation because of the emphasis on independence. So, I'll just add that as another thought.
Great. One additional question from James Pruitt. What is the most valuable skill set on a life science board today? And what is the most difficult type of background to find?
So I'll answer the last one because I've been involved in multiple searches for oncology clinical development expertise, who also happens to be a member of a diverse population. I think that's probably the toughest, sitting chief medical officer or former chief medical officer of a public company in the oncology space, who also is a diverse candidate.
That's that speaks to I think broader work to do, which is just developing a pipeline of talent and growing that talent such that hopefully the pool years from now.
Actually, that one search I'm involved in will be filled by a first-time board member.
Wow.
Great.
So let me take the first question there, Steve. I'm going to say the most valuable person on my board is my board chair. And that's not pandering to her. A board is its own body, it has its own dynamic, it has its own mini culture. And in order to function well, really the board chair needs to be very actively engaged, both with management and with each and every one of the board members individually, and then with groups of board members on an as-needed basis. And so I think paying attention to the right fit for a board chair and maximizing his or her value to the organization is probably the number one thing, particularly for a public company, that I would say that's the most important person on a board.
Great. Well, we've come to the conclusion of our time allotment, and this richness of discussion strikes one chord, which is that word diversity can be as large as we can imagine it to be. And I would encourage everybody as they're thinking of filling leadership positions or board positions, to truly think about the tremendous value of diverse perspectives and insights that ultimately, I think, result in better decisions and better governance. I really want to thank the three of you for your participation and tremendous insights on this topic, but more importantly, for all that you have done for our industry and continue to do. We all, I think, believe that this industry does lots of good, and I hope that you're continuing to contribute to build on the successes already achieved. So thanks, David,
Thank you, Steve.
Bill, and Rebecca for a great discussion, and continued success and good health.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
You too. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.